Victoria. I'm gonna wait a few more minutes and let some people jump in here. My name is Maren Hayes. I'm a producer here at Dash. We'll just give people a few more minutes and then we'll jump in.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. So Victoria, for those who don't know you, how about you tell us a little bit about your background, who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Victoria. I'm a freelance motion designer and illustrator, currently based in Washington, D.C. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I grew up not too far from the Philadelphia region. And like so many people in our industry, I actually started out in film school. So I did not study motion design while I was there. But towards the end of my senior year, I discovered this great program of After Effects and decided that that was something that I wanted to learn and to pursue a career in motion design. So shortly after graduating, I spent a lot of time learning After Effects through various online YouTube tutorials, as well as a couple of School of Motion classes. And eventually that led me to get my first job in motion design right here in DC in 2018.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. As I was going through, looking at your background, I realized there's some similarities. I went to school for photography and like hopped around in different programs. And then I kind of like realized in my senior year that wasn't really what I wanted to do. So how difficult do you feel like it was to make that switch? Was it just relearning everything? Was there kind of like a pivotal moment where you like, this is what I'm going to do, and that was your decision?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I feel like once I realized I knew I wanted to pursue motion design, I felt so motivated to just run with it and try and learn as much as I can, even if I had to learn it on my own. And so I found that I was really excited every time I found a new tutorial, or eventually that School of Motion course was really inspiring for me. And I felt that like a lot of what I was learning in film school kind of applied a little bit. But honestly, the biggest challenge was that by the time that I knew I wanted to pursue motion design and I was graduating college, the only work that I was getting was work in the industry that I didn't really want to be in. So I think my first couple of jobs out of school were related to arts marketing. I was teaching art classes briefly. I had a random sales job for a while that I did not like. And so because of that, I felt like I went through this period of a lot of anxiety and just feeling that like I had a lot that I needed to accomplish in order to get to where I wanted to be, and kind of just being unhappy with the work that I was in made it more difficult to stay motivated to learn the new skills that I needed to learn. But I mean, eventually, you just take it day by day and you work through it as best as you can. And eventually I made it through and I got to where I wanted to be.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. What do you feel like describes your style, and how has it kind of evolved from where you maybe started?
Sure. So I feel like it's so difficult to describe my work in just a few words because I feel as though I don't know that I have one specific style. I like to try out new styles and change it up sometimes, try out some different techniques maybe. But I think like some of my really early illustration work, was just good old fashioned pen and ink, slightly spooky, slightly macabre, mixed with maybe elements of humor, lots of weird creatures and humans that didn't really look quite human. And eventually I evolved that style as I got more into illustration. I started experimenting with color a lot more, started doing a lot more landscapes and just trying out different styles, different techniques. And now my characters aren't quite as sickly looking, but they still have like an odd element of humor to them that I really like. And then just with my motion work, I've been doing a lot of collage work as well as playing with more of an illustrative style that incorporates more lighting and some more camera techniques as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the idea of like finding, like different ways to find inspiration. Like we have a client right now that's been trying to work on some like character development, and just maybe they don't know what they want, but they just seem to not like any reference we show them. And so I just think looking like outside the traditional bounds, like I'm not gonna like say here's a bunch of sea creatures and now we're gonna turn them into people, but like I just think finding inspiration like outside of the normal bounds is just a really like interesting take on it.
Yeah, get weird with them. Pitch them at least one out there idea that, pulls elements of a sea creature or like some monster from somewhere far away that can just at least spark new ideas with the client, hopefully inspire them to try something new, because, that traditional vector style can definitely get bored and, overdone sometimes. So it's always fun when you can incorporate new ideas.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to try that. So you went full-time freelance during the pandemic. That's so brave.
I remember when the pandemic was first starting, there was a couple of clients that I had, and I was just doing, small, easy projects for them, but they reached out to me and said, hey, listen, like our company's probably not going to survive this. Like we can't work with you anymore. And so that freaked me out a little bit, because I thought, man, like I really want to become a freelancer and now I'm losing all these clients. But then quickly, I guess the reverse then happened, where a lot more people were needing the work and it became a lot more in demand, I noticed. So it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it was if you like, we're gonna cut and run and do it. Like last year was like oddly a really good year to do it. Everyone we talked to, from like studios to freelancers and agencies, like everybody felt that like immediate pause when the pandemic started of like, oh gosh, what's gonna happen? But then from talking to so many people, it was like everybody was like busier than they'd ever been. So I do feel like that's like, gotta feel like it's one of the things I've heard when you first start freelance is like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then you have to like wait for the work to come in. Right. And so kind of like a good way to just like kind of jump right in and get your hands dirty and just start experiencing the freelance life, like at its peak. I don't know. Do you feel like that was like a good way to just be kind of like thrown into a really crazy year to set expectations? Or would you like have rather, not that you can go back, but would you rather like have like dip your baby toe into it before you like get thrown into the crazy?
Absolutely. I don't think I would have changed it. I mean, I will say that my approach to it of working full-time and then moonlighting until I had enough clients, that can be really exhausting and that can definitely lead to burnout. So, I'm not that is the approach everyone should take, but it did work for me, especially when the pandemic was happening and I found myself with some extra free time. I didn't quite mind doing a little bit of extra work, but there was something about that I think, I felt really lucky and grateful that all this work was coming in. And I had a plan for myself of how I was going to transition into freelance. And so, I wanted to update my reel, redo my website, publish some new work out there. And I had this whole checklist of things that I wanted to do. I ended up doing none of that because I just had to jump ship at the time that I had to, just because of the work that was coming in.
Sure.
So part of me wishes I had, spent a little bit more time before going freelance preparing myself. But at the same time, I think it happened when it was supposed to happen. And it's been working out ever since.
Yeah, that's great. Looking at, since you started freelancing, since, I imagine you work with like a variety of different clients, different kinds of work. Do you feel like your creative approach kind of depends on who you're working with, or is there something that's more like a universal method that seems to work across all your clients or the types of work?
Yeah, kind of. I feel like it's mostly the same. What works right now, what is working for me really well is working directly with studios or just agencies, because there's something about just having a producer or an art director that I'm working with that I really enjoy and that I feel like I gain a lot from, because I so miss that collaborative spirit from working in an office where I just need like another genius mind that I can toss ideas with to help me get to that end result. And I feel like my work tends to be better, because sometimes if I'm just on my own working directly with the client, then there's a lot more I have to do on the front end with communication, staying organized, making sure the deliverables are clear and negotiating all the contracts. And sometimes I feel like I let that, take away from the creative process. But I mean, for the most part, it's mostly the same. I try to focus a lot on the pre-production, so developing an art direction and working heavily on storyboards. And then once everything's approved, moving into the actual animation. I think that political ad job I had where, we didn't really have the time, or most of our projects had to be turned around within 24 to 48 hours. And so that taught me to not overthink anything. That taught me that, we can't always have an art direction round. We can't have storyboards round. The first cut you deliver to the client needs to be close to done. And you just kind of have to read their mind and know what they're looking for. And so as stressful as that was, that really taught me to pay attention to what the client's looking for, knowing how to ask them questions, knowing how to suggest ideas, presenting ideas to them. And so, since then I've been able to help streamline and not overthink some of the work that I do sometimes.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We actually had a series we were working on, and like one of the production schedules kind of had to get crunched a little bit, and we realized like the client didn't have as much feedback on that one as they did on like all the others we did, and we're like, wait a minute, maybe there's something to this. Like nobody wanted to like take a nice long animation round and like condense it, but like maybe we were overthinking some of our work, and really like instinctually what we were making the client was really happy with. So that's funny that you mentioned that.
Sometimes the best work just comes like on the fly last minute, and that can be great.
And also like, we talk a lot about this, like if we have a client that has, a pretty quick turnaround, like at least there's like an end point, if there's like an event that a video needs to be done for, like you can't go through a million rounds. And so there's like some end to it. Whereas some projects you work on like longer, and I feel like, you get that burnout of you're looking at the same thing over and over again.
Yes.
How do you get away from it?
Yes, I feel that completely.
You talked a little bit about burnout earlier, and I can imagine, especially, starting your freelance career while everyone is at home in a pandemic, you're at home and you're at work and it's all the same thing. How have you, prevented or tried to prevent burnout, especially this past year?
Yeah, it's really tough. To be honest, I don't know that I was successful at that last year when the pandemic was going on. The best that I could do was just step away from my computer as often as I could. One really cool thing about DC is that there's a massive park that runs the whole length of the district. And there's a big road that cuts through the middle of it, but the city shut down that road to drivers. So it was only open to pedestrians. So that kind of gave us access to more trails and, encourage people to go outside. Exercising is a big thing for me. I feel like running really clears my mind a lot. Just listening to music, having virtual chats with some friends really helped me. Just anything that is, I could get away from work and away from my computer really helped me just try and relax, take it day by day, know that we're going to come out of this eventually. Try not to get too sad about all these events that I was looking forward to that were getting canceled. And just taking it each day as it came.
Yeah, that's I think something that I really struggled with, like as my personality type, like I'm a planner, and so like when everything like shut down, it was like you're just living the same day over and over again, it's like Groundhog Day. So how do you like plan out your days so you like A, don't lose your mind, and B, like set time aside? I think the downside of working from home is that you're in the same place, like you don't have the separation. So how do you like physically create that separation so that you don't run into feeling like you've just been sitting in front of your computer for all day?
That's so tough, especially, then suddenly it's 10 p.m. at night and you're still answering emails because your computer's right there.
Because you can,
Yeah, I was guilty of doing that for sure.
I did notice a client of mine had in like the their footer of their email, like, because he sent an email kind of late at night, and it said something like, my working hours might not be your working hours. So, like just because, and I know he has a young kid too, and so I get the struggle of finding time. And so I love the idea that like, just because you get an email late at night does not mean that you need to reply to said email late at night. So like taking that pressure off of each other, that, I might work better at certain times than other people. And so not needing to like kind of standardize that across everybody, because we all work differently.
There was one moment last year where I had sent an email to a client at like 7 p.m. on a Friday and they didn't respond, and I got upset. And then when I realized I was getting upset that they weren't responding to my email, I said, okay, that's it. Like, this is going too far. I need to give myself a break.
Gotta step away from this. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Something that you were kind of starting to talk about earlier, but as a freelancer, you're juggling a ton of different roles. You're running your business, you're producing, you're animating, designing. How do you find the balance when, maybe you don't have an outlet like a studio or other people to work with? How do you kind of balance all those different roles?
Yeah, so just staying organized as best as I can. I know everyone's process is a little bit different, but what's been working for me really well is just making sure that I communicate as best I can. So something that I obsess over is having an organized inbox. So I use Gmail, and a great thing about Gmail is you can have labels and sublabels. So anytime a client emails me, they get a label for their client tag, and then every project gets its individual sublabel, which is great because I can just go into Gmail with whatever project I'm working on, just click on that sublabel, and I'm only focused on those emails in that particular chain. Because I'm definitely guilty of multitasking and working on different projects throughout the day, and it can get confusing, especially if I'm, pre-production for one thing, in production for something else. That a lot is happening and switching programs so quickly, and staying organized has been really helpful. Something else that I started doing recently too is just keeping like a kind of like a one sheet of just what's happening for every project. So I'm currently using Dropbox. So with Dropbox paper, for every project that comes in, just kind of keeping notes of what's happening and where we are in the project. So I can reference that sheet at any time. So anytime a client sends me new assets, I link it to that Dropbox paper. Or if there's a particular color palette or something changes, all of the notes, every change that happens, all of the scheduling, everything is listed out in that paper, because sometimes, especially with some clients, they are not always the best at maintaining a good email. So I have a few clients in particular that are, like to start new threads every time they have something to say, or sometimes they respond in the wrong thread. And so it can get very confusing. So rather than trying to search through my email threads, all I have to do is reference that one sheet, and then I have everything that I need right from there. But yeah, I think for the most part, I just, with the type of person that I am, I like change. I like constant change. So I like, illustrating one day and then animating some other time, or just doing like more admin work another day. So it's helpful for me to just to stay motivated when there's something almost different every day that I'm focusing on.
That's great. And this conversation is going like right to my like type A personality. Like I love hearing about people's Gmail filters and their the way they stay organized, because it is, obviously it's my personality type. So I really appreciate it, but it just makes everything run, when you're doing a ton of different things, as long as you have that foundation set, like it really does help you in the long run. I've noticed sometimes when we're really busy and I like do some shortcuts, I'm like later on I'm like, oh, why did I do that? I'm just like setting myself up for more work. So
yeah.
it's also like finding what works for you. And I know that everybody has their own way they work or program they like. And so I think it's also like, if you like to write things down on a notebook, like write them down. If I feel like the best kind of organizational tool is whatever you'll use. So not trying to like find out the latest software, whatever people say is what works, and find something that you will be consistently using, because that'll also help.
It doesn't always have to be some kind of like app or anything. I'm also the same way. I have an iPad, so there's an app that I really like called Good Notes, and it's all it is just a basic notebook. And you can create templates. I've created some templates for myself, but it's that feeling of writing a task list down and then crossing it off as you go is also extremely satisfying. I'm a big advocate for that.
Oh, that's great. And I just wrote it down because,
Yay.
I always need a new tool to look into. I use Evernote, but same thing.
Oh,
just a way to have my like high level notes, keeps me organized.
Yeah, I like it because it gives you a lot of space to doodle. As a big doodler, I like to just draw little things around my notes to help me. I don't know that it actually helps me in any way. It's just something that I like to do, but
I feel like it like keeps your brain, I don't know, working, moving, active.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it can't hurt, Cool. Let's see some other questions. How many projects, and maybe this last year, since it's your first year starting freelance, how many projects on average, are you working on at a time, or how many do you feel like you were able to complete this past year?
Yeah, great question. So because I was working full time mostly of last year, I feel like I didn't quite take on that many side projects, although I did count, and I think it came out to about 16 projects I took outside of my full time job last year. And most of those were like a smaller scale project, whether it was just like a quick logo design or some social media ads or whatever, a couple of animated projects. But this year, I try to keep it so that I always have one big project on my plate. And by big project, I just mean a project that has a schedule of maybe 6 to 8 or more weeks, where I'm more involved on the illustration process as well as the animation process. So I see the full scope of the project. And then, maybe one or two, depending on what the time needs are for that. And then I like to take on just smaller projects as well, just to kind of keep me motivated. So I'm not just stuck on this one project all the time. So I'll take on some smaller projects as well that, maybe take less than 20 hours of effort on my end. But just something just to, change it up a little bit and keep it interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier, when you get those like projects that never seem to end. My husband's in engineering, and his kind of projects are like years long. And I like start to complain when like a project goes like longer than a few months, because you like kind of start to get sick of it, and you want to like you said, get something new and fresh that kind of like changes how you look at things. So
Yeah, that's true. I'm encountering that right now with a project that I started in December, and it's a series of short videos that will not be wrapped until I think September. So I'm very much struggling to stay motivated and come up with fresh ideas for that one. But at the same time, I'm thankful to have those long-term projects, because it's nice to kind of have that security, knowing that I'll continue to have something on my plate, but it can certainly be a challenge.
yeah, totally. I mean, I think it all comes back to balance. Like you said, it's important to get those like longer term projects for stability and security, job security and stuff like that, but kind of adding in things that keep your brain working and make sure that you don't get uninspired by doing the same thing. I think that's important.
Definitely.
What are you looking forward to in the next year? Like any kind of new work, or are you trying anything new like stylistically?
Kind of. So something that's been happening lately that I'm really excited about is that, so the clients that I do have, a lot of them I work with pretty consistently, and I have been for the past year or so. They started to come to me with projects that I don't necessarily have a lot of experience in, which I think is really great. I worked really hard to maintain a good relationship with these clients, and just now they're starting to come to me with projects that might require a little bit of more frame by frame animation or a little bit more character animation, which I really don't have a lot of that experience, at least not on my portfolio. But it is something that I said to them, I would like more experience, in such and such. And they said, okay, great. We trust you. Let's try it out and let's see how you do that. And so that's something that's been really exciting. There's a project I'm working on right now that is requiring a lot of, frame by frame animation, which is challenging, but it's going well. And I hope that the end result turns out okay. We will see. But as far
I'm
as
sure it
next
will.
year, yeah, I hope to continue working with the clients that I have, possibly branch out, meet some new clients as well. I think there's a version of my life where maybe I check out a new city. I don't entirely know yet. I think I'd be more than happy staying in DC for another year, but
Raleigh.
yeah, okay. We shall see.
Not far. Yeah, that's cool. One thing you just mentioned was, if there's a style or something that you want to try that you're not like you haven't done before, what's your process in, like learning? I mean, obviously from your background, you're like motivated to learn on your own. And so do you have like any process, or kind of how do you go about that when you find something that you want to learn?
Yeah, it really depends. On the one hand, I think I can learn a lot just from trial and error, or just chatting with some friends that do that particular style and kind of pick their brain to see how they go about it. So that's something that's working, kind of well for me, even if it's just a project that I don't end up completing, or I open Blender and I'm super into Blender for like a week and then I don't look at it again for like 3 months. It's just something that like I'm always trying something. Occasionally I will jump back to doing like either a School of Motion course or another paid course that is really helpful for me, especially when I'm learning something. Like it's one thing just to learn someone's process on how to do a specific technique, but I'm the type of person that needs to understand how and why it works the way that it does. And so sometimes that more like formal education is really helpful for me.
Yeah, I think there's, two important things that you said, like having that foundation is really important, but then also just getting your hands into it and like trying things. I think like for me personally, if I'll watch a tutorial about, something, not maybe animation, but like anything, I can only, I have to like do it myself to like kind of figure it out. And I think that's just something that is, how your brain works and how you personally can work. But it's just so important because you can watch as many videos as you want, but unless you like actually get into it and try it and maybe fail, you won't really learn it until you try.
That's so true. And it can be tough too, because everyone has a different approach to how they do something, especially with After Effects and animation. So the more I try, the more I learn, the more I fail, but the more I get out of it.
And you still learn.
Yeah. I still learn. Yeah.
And something else you said was just having the trust from your clients. And again, I think that's so important about like maintaining the relationships with people you're working with. Like, you say, I'm going to try X, and they just trust you because that you have that relationship established is something.
Which is crazy. I was not expecting that at all. So I was really excited to see that happen. And so I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a testament to the relationship y'all have created and the work that you've done, which is awesome. Well, we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm going to pause for a second. And if anyone from the audience has any questions or wanted to add anything to the conversation that Victoria and I are having, go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll keep chatting about a few things and wrap up here shortly. But I'm really excited that all of y'all have joined us today. While we wait to see if anyone raises their hand, what about some challenges that you didn't anticipate as you went freelance? I mean, again, I think we've kind of talked about some of them, especially that it coincided with the pandemic, but does anything stick out?
Yeah, I mean, there was always a challenge of just not knowing what was ahead and not really knowing what I was doing. And maybe that's just a lack of confidence or, just uncertainty of how the next couple of months were going to go. I feel like I'm kind of the type of person that like needs to follow not a set of rules per se, but just like knowing that I need to have some kind of game plan, for how things are supposed to go, and then have like a backup plan just in case it doesn't work out the way that it does. And so I think those first couple of months I kind of struggled to not necessarily like the work was coming in and there was plenty of it, but just feeling like I was good enough to continue doing that type of work, if that makes sense. So I was feeling a little self-conscious in that I hadn't updated my reel yet. My website was like lacking. So there were a lot of things that I was just a little bit, insecure about that I felt like was preventing me from focusing all of my attention to the work that I was doing. So that was kind of challenging, but eventually I worked through that. It took a little bit longer than I was hoping for, but I eventually got a new reel updated. I'm still working on the website, but that's, it'll come over time. But it's something that I think I'm always working at. I know that when I was first starting out in the industry, I struggled a lot with the fact that I was new to motion design, but I wasn't new to the workforce. And so I felt like there was this weird disconnect with some of the people that I was working with where they saw me as someone that was just brand new to the whole workforce and I didn't know anything. And I just really struggled to advocate for myself and just say, hey, no, this is who I am. I'm perfectly capable of doing the work that you hired me to do. And that was something that I really struggled with. And to an extent, I think I still struggle with that a little bit. So that's something that I am working through, trying to speak a bit more confidently and advocating for myself and negotiating.
Yeah, I mean, that is so important. I know you and Madison talked about it on your Tuesday Takeover blog, but like that imposter syndrome of like, the self-doubt and how do you overcome that? And I think, for me, it's a little bit of like, fake it until you make it, like, again, that you can do something, you have the confidence in yourself, and like, you just need to prove that to other people. I don't know, but that's a really great point. And we do have someone who raised their hand. Someone get your microphone enabled.
Hey y'all, thanks again for joining us for Mograph Lunch. As a reminder, this is just the first part of a longer conversation that happens every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Clubhouse. We'll continue the NPG conversation as we talk about news, projects, and general industry advice. And then we'll open up the door on Clubhouse to answer questions live, interact with some of your peers, and get to know some of the folks in the industry. Follow the link below for more information, and we will see you next week.